And we're back talking about the big issues that Canada is facing as we get rolling here in 2024. Kate and Matt, we've talked about the federal level, we've talked about the provincial level, can't forget about cities. Matt, let's start with you this time. What do you see as sort of the biggest issues that cities are facing in this country? Is there maybe a big common one that a lot of them are sharing and facing?
Well, I think there's probably two, and of course it varies by city. But where I live in Toronto, we see a very big tax hike looming. Olivia Chow's first budget, and we're looking at something like 10.5% increase on residential property taxes. And I know many other cities I've seen in the news, like Calgary, are facing very much the same thing. And I think one of the things that cities should really look at is trying to get spending under control in Toronto, which I'm most familiar with, for example, there was a report a couple of years ago by Cardis, which is a think tank, looking at infrastructure construction. And they estimated that as a result of closed tendering, which really means um, restricting bids on construction to certain unionized shops, Toronto was probably overpaying for construction by around $300 to $400 million a year. This is just basically an inefficiency, a gift to the unions that has no compensating benefit. So I think cities really need to look carefully at how they're spending. And I think the second big issue that if you look around the country really is crime. Violent crime is on the rise, and Toronto is no exception. And we've really had for I think 5 or 7 years now, an increase in violent crime across the country. So I think that's something that certainly cities, and when they're considering their police budgets and things like that, that's something they have to take a hard look at.
Yeah, I think city politics is pretty much governed by taxes, transit, and crime. So Matt spoke about two of those in a fair bit of detail. So I won't go in depth on those. But transit issues are also going to be a major challenge. Matt mentions infrastructure. There's been a ton of challenges in Ottawa, in Toronto, and other major cities in terms of getting public transit projects moving because there's not the people. There's major cost overruns because of what we had during the pandemic, supply chain issues, et cetera. So a lot of these long-awaited transit commitments that premiers and city leaders have put in the window have been left to languish. So that's going to be a challenge. Just to Matt's point on crime, I think I'd expand that as well to just say the opioid addiction issues that we see is spilling out into streets. I think is really impacting people a little bit more than perhaps it was in the past. They're seeing kind of the result of failed policies right in front of them and the impact that it has primarily in cities, but also in small, mid-sized cities as well. So I think that there's going to be a lot more pressure, and rightly so, on municipal leaders to talk about, what treatment options exist for these individuals. What are we doing to make sure that they have some access to housing, and what is being done generally to try and make sure that cities are safer and more livable, and that we're not forcing people onto the street that are grappling with some major addictions issues.
All right, some good points there. 25 seconds each. What would be the top issue or thing that you would change if you're a city politician?
I can go first. I think that the way we've approached kind of the opioid issue in Canada has been just a proven failure. I'd be looking at the quote unquote safe supply policies that my city was enabling and giving a very hard look as to whether or not that was working. And I think we're only going to see those challenges continue as affordability remains a problem, as housing remains a problem, so we need to really look at some of the systemic issues here on the opioids challenge and crisis.
Okay, Matt, 20 seconds to you. What would you change?
Well, Well, for me, whether I'm a municipal or provincial or federal politician, the one issue I always go back to is reducing government spending. And it's always Milton Friedman's famous phrase that nobody spends somebody else's money as carefully as he spends his own. If we want to have a more productive economy with higher standards of living, we have to, curtail government spending and get, more of the economic resources back in the hands of individual families and the private sector.
All right, listen, thank you both for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So we talked about the housing crisis that Canada is facing, the cost of living crisis, the healthcare problems that we're having coast to coast. Are there any issues that we didn't talk about that deserve mention? You can send us an email at ideas@thenewsforum.ca. Thanks for tuning in.